The Sunder Gates were where you went to die. And as Siren huddled in the mouth of a frozen cave, the shadow voices whispering their endless accusations in her ears, she understood that her king had sent her here for exactly that purpose: to die slowly, to die forgotten, to die with the truth rotting inside her chest where no one would ever hear it. 3 moons had passed since the soldiers had dragged her beyond the mountains that separated the kingdom of Thornvale from the wastelands. 3 moons since the man she had served, had trusted, had secretly loved, had looked at her with disgust and spoken the words that had shattered her world. Banished, for treason, for dark magic, for crimes against the crown. None of it was true. But the shadows had shown her something they should not have, whispered a secret that someone powerful needed buried, and now she was paying the price for hearing what was never meant to be known. Siren pressed her palms against her ears, but it did nothing to silence the dead. Their voices crawled through her skull like frost through cracked stone. The shadow gift was a curse dressed as a blessing. She heard the final words of every soul killed unjustly. Their rage, their pleas, their desperate accusations against those who had murdered them. And someone in Thornvale had murdered many. She would die here with those names on her lips, and no one to hear them. Then the riders came. Through the howling wind, Siren saw their banners first. Not the silver stag of Thornvale, but a black wolf on crimson. The sigil of Keldros. The rival kingdom. The enemy. Their Alpha King rode at the front, and when his eyes found her huddled in the snow, he did not turn away. He dismounted and walked toward her, this king of wolves, who should have left her to freeze. "I'm taking you back," he said. Sirene's heart stopped, because returning meant dying. The sovereign's chain made certain of that. Any wolf banished by a king could never return to the lands that had cast them out, not without their heart stopping in their chest. Neither of them understood yet that her death was only the beginning of everything. The wastelands beyond the Sunder Gates had no name because no one survived long enough to name them. Siren had lasted 3 moons, and she knew she was borrowed time walking on frozen legs. The cold had seeped so deep into her bones that she had stopped shivering weeks ago. Her wolf, once a bright and fierce thing, had gone quiet inside her. Too weak to shift, too starved to hunt. But it was not the cold that was killing her. It was the shadows. They never stopped. Day and night, their whispers coiled through her mind like smoke through a cracked window. The voices of the unjustly dead, crying out for someone to hear their final words, begging her to carry their truths to the living. She poisoned me, my own mother, for the inheritance. He buried me alive, said I knew too much. The queen. It was always the queen. Siren pressed her hands over her ears and screamed into the wind, but the shadows did not care. They never cared. They only needed to be heard, and she was the only one cursed enough to hear them. A shadow singer, they called her kind. Rare, reviled, feared. In Thornvale, the gift had been declared dark magic generations ago. Any wolf discovered with the shadow voice was executed on sight. Siren had hidden her curse for 23 years, had bitten her tongue bloody to keep from speaking the truths that the dead poured into her, had smiled and served and pretended to be ordinary, until 3 moons ago, when the shadows had screamed something she could not ignore, until she had made the mistake of trying to warn him. And Alpha King Corvath, the man she had foolishly believed would protect her, had stared at her with winter in his eyes and spoken her death sentence. Banishment, effective immediately. She is never to return. The memory still burned. The way his jaw had hardened. The way his mother, Queen Valdris, had smiled from the shadows of the throne room like a spider watching a fly, realized it was already wrapped in silk. Siren had not even been permitted to speak in her own defense. Now she was here, dying by inches. Forgotten. The sound of hoofbeats cut through the wind. Siren's head snapped up, her frozen body flooding with sudden desperate alertness. Wolves did not ride horses. Wolves ran in their shifted forms, covering ground faster than any mount, which meant these riders were either human or... Her breath caught. The banner snapped in the wind. Black wolf on crimson. Keldros. Enemies. Cyrene scrambled backward, her numb legs buckling beneath her. The riders were coming fast, a dozen at least, their horses' breath steaming in the frozen air. At their head rode a figure in black armor, his dark hair whipping behind him, his presence radiating the unmistakable pressure of an alpha. Not just any alpha, an alpha king. No, Cyrene whispered. No, no, no. She had nowhere to run. Her legs would not carry her. Her wolf was too weak to shift. She was prey, and the predator had already seen her. The Alpha King reined his horse to a stop 20 paces from her cave. For a long moment he simply looked at her. His face was sharp and angular, all clean lines and controlled intensity. His eyes were dark amber, the color of autumn fires, and they studied her with an expression she could not read. Not hunger, not cruelty, something else. He dismounted in one fluid motion and walked toward her. "Don't come closer," Cyrene rasped. Her voice was ruined from screaming at the shadows. "I have nothing worth taking, no information about Thornvale, nothing." The Alpha King stopped 5 paces away. Up close, he was younger than she had expected. Perhaps 30 winters, no more. There was a scar along his jaw, faded white, and something in the way he held himself suggested he had earned it the hard way. "You're Cyrene," he said. Not a question. Her blood went colder than the wind. "How do you know my name?" "Because I've been looking for you." His gaze never left hers. "You're the shadow singer that Corvath banished." Cyrene's heart slammed against her ribs. He knew what she was. Which meant he had come to kill her. Or worse, to drag her back to Thornvale and hand her over for execution so he could curry favor with his rival. "Whatever he's paying you," she said, her voice cracking, "it's not worth it. I'm already dying. The cold will finish me within days. You don't need to. I'm not here to kill you." The Alpha King cut her off, his voice sharp but not unkind. "And I'm not here to return you to Corvath." Cyrene stared at him. "Then why?" He was silent for a moment. The wind howled between them, carrying ice and the faint whisper of shadows that only she could hear. "Because I need to know what you heard," he said finally. What secret was terrible enough that the King of Thornvale banished his most trusted servant to die in the wastelands? Cyrene's breath caught. Most trusted servant. He knew who she had been, what she had been to the crown. Before Valdris had destroyed everything. "Even if I told you," she whispered, "it wouldn't matter. I can't return. The Sovereign's chain... I know about the chain." His expression hardened. Any wolf banished by a king cannot return to the lands of their birth without dying. The old magic binds it. "Then you know there's no point in taking me anywhere." The Alpha King studied her for a long moment. Then slowly, deliberately, he removed his heavy cloak and held it out to her. "I'm not taking you back to Thornvale," he said. "I'm taking you to Keldros." Cyrene blinked. "What?" "My kingdom. My lands. The chain binds you to Thornvale's borders, not mine." He stepped closer, the cloak still extended. "You can live in Keldros. Recover. And when you're ready, you can tell me what the shadows showed you." It was a trap. It had to be a trap. Kings did not rescue banished wolves. Kings did not offer sanctuary to enemies of their rivals. There had to be something he wanted. Some price she would pay later. But the cloak was warm in his hands, and she was so cold, and the shadows were so loud, and she was so tired of dying alone. "Why?" she asked, the word barely a breath. "Why would you help me?" The Alpha King's expression flickered with something she could not name. Anger, perhaps. Or grief. Or both. "Because 3 years ago," he said, his voice low, "Corvath banished someone I loved beyond these same mountains, and I was too late to save her." He pressed the cloak into her frozen hands. I won't be too late again. The journey to Keldros took 4 days. Seren spent most of it unconscious, her body finally surrendering to the exhaustion and cold it had been fighting for 3 moons. She woke in fragments, the rhythm of hooves beneath her, strong arms holding her steady against a broad chest. The scent of cedar and wood smoke, and something darker, wilder, that her wolf recognized even in its weakened state. Alpha. Each time she surfaced, the shadows were quieter, not gone, but muffled somehow, as if the distance from Thornvale had weakened their grip on her mind. Or perhaps it was simply that she was too tired to hear them clearly. On the 4th day, she woke properly. She was lying in a bed, an actual bed, with clean linens and thick furs and a fire crackling somewhere nearby. The warmth was so foreign after months of cold that it took her several moments to remember how to breathe without shivering. Easy. A woman's voice, calm and professional. You've been asleep for 2 days. Don't try to move too quickly. Sirene turned her head, which took more effort than it should have. A middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair sat beside her bed, hands folded in her lap. Her eyes were kind but assessing. Who are you? Sirene rasped. Mirith, the palace healer. The woman reached for a cup of water on the bedside table and pressed it gently to Sirene's lips. Small sips. Your body has forgotten how to accept kindness? The words hit harder than they should have. Sirene drank slowly, the cool water soothing her raw throat. When she had finished, Mirith set the cup aside and studied her with an expression that made Sirene want to look away. The king has been asking about you, Mirith said. Sirene's heart stuttered. Which king? Mirith's lips curved slightly. The one who carried you 4 days through frozen mountain passes without rest. The one who hasn't slept since you arrived because he's been pacing outside your door like a caged wolf. She tilted her head. King Malon does not bring strangers into his home. You must be quite significant. Malon. So that was his name. Sirene had not thought to ask during their brief exchange in the wastelands. She had been too cold, too afraid, too certain it was all some elaborate cruelty. I'm not significant, she said. I'm banished. Perhaps. Mirith rose and smoothed her skirts. But the banished do not usually make Alpha Kings ride personally into enemy territory. Whatever you are, child, you are not insignificant. Before Sirene could respond, the door opened. And there he was. King Malon looked different in the warm firelight. Less severe somehow. His dark hair was loose around his shoulders, and he had exchanged his black armor for simpler clothes, a gray tunic and dark trousers that made him look almost approachable. Almost, but his eyes were the same. That burning autumn gaze, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Leave us, he said to Mirith. The healer bowed and departed without argument. The door clicked shut behind her, and Sirene was alone with the rival king. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Malon crossed the room and sat in the chair Mirith had vacated. Up close, Sirene could see the exhaustion carved into his features, the shadows beneath his eyes, the tension in his jaw. You look terrible, she said before she could stop herself. His lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. You're not exactly glowing yourself. Fair point. Sirene pushed herself up against the pillows, her arms trembling with the effort. Malon reached out instinctively to help her, then stopped, his hand hovering uncertainly. May I? He asked. The courtesy startled her. Corvath had never asked. Corvath had simply taken, moved, commanded. He was king. His touch required no permission, but this king was asking. Yes, she murmured. His hands were gentle as they helped her sit upright, arranging the pillows behind her back. His skin was warm against hers, warm in a way that felt almost wrong after months of cold. When he pulled away, Sirene found herself missing the contact. Dangerous, she thought. That's dangerous. You've been unconscious for 2 days, Malon said, settling back in his chair. Mirith says your body is recovering, but your mind. He paused, searching for words. She says you cry out in your sleep. Names she doesn't recognize. Accusations. The shadows. Siren looked away, shame heating her cheeks. I can't control it. The voices. They don't stop. The shadow gift. She flinched at the words. In Thornvale, speaking them aloud was enough to warrant execution. I know what you are, Malin continued, his voice dropping lower. I know what shadow singers can do. I know why Corvath's line has spent generations trying to eradicate your kind. His piercing gaze held hers. I also know that you are not evil, that your gift is exactly that. A gift. Not dark magic. Sirene's throat tightened. How can you possibly know that? Because the person Corvath banished 3 years ago, Malin said, his tone rough with old grief. The one I told you about. She was a shadow singer too. The words hung in the air between them. She was my sister, he continued. She heard something she shouldn't have, tried to warn Corvath, just like you did, and he sent her to die in the same mountains where I found you. Siren's heart ached. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. His expression hardened. Be angry. Be furious. Because whatever my sister heard, whatever you heard, it was important enough that someone in Thornvale has been murdering shadow singers to keep it buried. He leaned forward, his gaze blazing with fierce determination. So tell me, Siren, what did the shadows show you? Siren stared at King Maeslan, her pulse thundering in her ears. The truth sat heavy on her tongue, bitter as poison. She had carried it for 3 moons, screaming it into the empty wastelands where no one could hear. And now someone was finally asking, someone who might actually believe her. But speaking it aloud felt like stepping off a cliff. If I tell you, she said slowly, there's no taking it back. You'll be involved, targeted. Whatever wants this secret buried will come for you too. Malin's expression didn't waver. I've been at war with Corvath for 15 years. Whatever Thornvale throws at me, I can handle. This isn't Corvath. Sirene's voice sharpened. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The king isn't the enemy. He's just the weapon. Something shifted in Malin's gaze. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Explain, he said. Siren drew a shaky breath. The shadows stirred at the edges of her consciousness, as if sensing she was finally ready to give voice to their accusations. 3 moons ago, she began. A delegation from a minor house arrived at Thornvale for treaty negotiations. Lord Varen and his wife, Lady Osha. I was assigned to attend them during their stay. She paused, remembering. They seemed nervous, frightened even. I assumed it was because they were in the presence of the Alpha King. But it wasn't. No. Siren's hands twisted in the furs covering her lap. On the 3rd night, I found Lady Osha weeping in the gardens. She begged me to help her escape. Said they had discovered something terrible and were going to be silenced for it. What did they discover? She didn't get to tell me. Sirene's voice went cold. Because the next morning, they were both dead. Officially, it was a tragic accident. A fire in their guest chambers. Malin's expression hardened. Convenient. Very. Siren met his eyes. That night, the shadows came to me. Lord Varen and Lady Osha, screaming their final words, their terror, their accusations. She paused, steadying herself. They were murdered because they had proof that Queen Valdris has been systematically poisoning the royal bloodline for decades. The silence that followed was absolute. Valdris, Malin repeated slowly. Corvath's mother. Yes. Siren nodded. The shadows showed me everything, every death, every convenient illness, every rival heir who fell sick and never recovered. She's been calling anyone who threatens her control over the throne, including, her voice dropped, Corvath's father. The former king died of winter fever. The former king was poisoned. Sirene's voice was steady now, fueled by the cold certainty the shadows had given her. Valdris killed her own mate so she could rule through her son, and she's been killing anyone who gets too close to the truth ever since. Malin sat back in his chair, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, processing. "You told Corvath this?" he asked finally. "I tried." The memory still burned. "I requested a private audience. I thought foolishly that he would want to know, that he would protect me, investigate." She laughed bitterly. Instead, Valdris was there when I arrived. She had anticipated everything. Before I could speak a single word, she accused me of dark magic, of being a shadow singer, of trying to manipulate the king with demonic lies. And Corvath believed her? He didn't even hesitate. Cyrene's voice cracked despite her efforts to control it. "I had served him for 5 years. I had been loyal. I had—" She stopped, unwilling to say the rest. "I had loved him." Malin's expression softened slightly, as if he understood what she had left unspoken. "He banished you without a trial," he said, "without hearing your evidence." Valdris made sure of it. Cyrene's fists clenched. She stood behind him the entire time, whispering in his ear, and he just listened, obeyed, like a puppet on strings. The words hung in the air, damning. "She's been controlling him his entire life," Cyrene continued. "The shadows have shown me that too. Small manipulations. Isolation from anyone who might challenge her influence. She's molded him into exactly the king she needs. Powerful enough to hold the throne, but blind enough never to see the knife at his back." Malin was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low, controlled. "If what you're saying is true, then Valdris isn't just a murderer. She's a threat to every kingdom that borders Thornvale. A queen regent who kills without consequence and controls her son like a puppet." He met her eyes. "This is why shadow singers are hunted. Not because you're dangerous, but because you expose the truth that powerful people need buried." Cyrene nodded slowly. "We hear the dead, and the dead don't lie. Then we need proof." Malin leaned forward. "Living proof. Something that can't be dismissed as dark magic or demonic manipulation." "I don't have that." Cyrene's shoulders sagged. "All I have are voices in my head, the testimony of ghosts that no one else can hear." "Then we find proof." Malin's voice hardened with resolve. "Lord Varen and Lady Osha must have hidden their evidence somewhere. They were careful enough to discover Valdris's crimes. They would have been careful enough to protect what they found." Hope flickered in Cyrene's chest, fragile and uncertain. "You believe me?" Malin held her gaze steadily. "My sister was called a liar too. A dark witch. A manipulator." His eyes burned with old pain. "She died alone in the snow because I didn't believe her in time. I won't make that mistake again." The words settled over Cyrene like a bomb. For the first time in 3 moons, someone believed her. Someone was willing to fight beside her. It was almost enough to make her forget that she was still dying. "There's something else you should know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something I haven't told you." Malin's expression shifted. Wariness crept into his eyes. "The Sovereign's chain," Cyrene continued. "It binds me to Thornvale's borders, yes. Your kingdom is safe territory. But the evidence we need? The proof of Valdris's crimes. It's in Thornvale." She paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. "If I cross back into those lands, even for a moment my heart will stop. The old magic will kill me before I can speak a single word of truth." Malin's face went pale. "Then we find another way." "There is no other way." Cyrene shook her head. "Only the king who spoke the banishment can revoke it. Only Corvath's word can break the chain." She laughed bitterly. "And he would sooner watch me die than admit he was wrong." Malin rose abruptly from his chair. He crossed to the window and stood there, his back to her, his shoulders rigid with tension. The firelight cast his shadow long across the floor. Then we make him admit it, he said finally. How? Malin turned. His gaze blazed with something fierce, something dangerous, and something that made Sireni's wolf stir despite its weakness. By doing what Valdris fears most, he said, by bringing you back. Siren's blood went cold. That will kill me. Not if we're fast enough. Malin's voice was steady, certain. The chain doesn't kill instantly. It weakens, drains. You'd have days, maybe a week, before your heart gives out. Enough time to reach the capital. Enough time to stand before Corvath and force him to see what his mother really is. You're asking me to die slowly in front of the man who threw me away. I'm asking you to fight. Malin crossed the room and knelt before her bed, bringing his eyes level with hers. I'm asking you to let me help you reclaim everything that was stolen. Your name, your freedom, the truth. His voice dropped. And if we fail, if Corvath refuses to listen, then at least you won't die alone in the cold. You'll die standing, fighting, making them face what they did. Sireni stared at him. This king she barely knew, who had ridden into enemy territory to save a stranger, who believed her when no one else would, who was now offering to walk beside her into certain danger. Why? She asked, her voice a fragile thread. Why risk everything for me? A muscle feathered in Malin's cheek. Something vulnerable flickered in his gaze before he locked it away. Because Valdris has taken enough, he said, his tone rough. Because my sister deserved someone to fight for her, and I failed her. Because every shadow singer she's murdered, every truth she's buried, demands justice. He held her gaze. And because when I found you in that cave, something in me knew. Knew what? Malin was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. That I was always meant to find you. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was ready to examine. Finally, Siren drew a breath. If I do this, she said slowly, if I go back, I need you to promise me something. Name it. If I die, she said, you finish it. You expose Valdris. You make sure every shadow voice I carry gets heard. You don't let her win. Malin reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm and strong and impossibly steady. You're not going to die, he said. But yes, I promise. Siren looked at their joined hands. At this king who barely knew her, who was promising to burn his world down for a woman he had found half dead in the snow. Either he was the most honorable man she had ever met, or the most dangerous. She suspected he might be both. The War Council of Keldros met in a chamber carved from black stone, deep in the heart of the mountain palace. Siren had been in Malin's kingdom for 5 days now. 5 days of rest, of warmth, of silence from the shadows that had tormented her for so long. Mirith had declared her strong enough to walk, though the healer's eyes still carried worry whenever she looked at Sirene's too thin frame. Now Sirene stood at the edge of the council chamber, painfully aware of every eye fixed upon her. There were 7 of them seated around the curved table. Malin's most trusted advisors, his war leaders, the wolves who had kept Keldros safe through 15 years of conflict with Thornvale, and not a single one of them looked pleased to see her. You cannot be serious. The speaker was a broad-shouldered man with gray streaking his dark beard. General Bracken, Malin had called him. His voice echoed off the stone walls like a thunderclap. You want us to march into enemy territory for a banished wolf we found half dead in the snow? I want us to expose a murderer who has been destabilizing the entire region for decades, Malin replied calmly. He sat at the head of the table, his posture relaxed, but Siren could see the tension coiled beneath the surface. Valdris isn't just Thornvale's problem. She's everyone's problem. And we're supposed to believe this on the word of a shadow singer? Another voice, sharp and feminine. A woman with close-cropped silver hair and calculating blue eyes. Lady Fenara, the spy master. Your Majesty, with respect, Her kind are known for manipulation, dark whispers, lies dressed as truth. Siren's hands clenched at her sides, but she forced herself to remain silent. Malin had warned her this would happen. His counsel needed to be convinced, and she could not afford to appear defensive. Her kind, Malin said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register, includes my sister. The chamber went still. Sereth was a shadow singer, Malin continued. She heard something that threatened Valdris, and she was murdered for it. I will not stand here and listen to you speak of darkness and lies when my own blood carried this gift and died because I didn't believe her in time. General Bracken looked away, his expression uncomfortable. Your Majesty, Lady Fenara said, more carefully now. I meant no disrespect to Princess Sereth. But you must understand our concern. This woman appears from nowhere, claims to have evidence against the most powerful woman in Thornvale, and asks us to risk war for her cause. It strains credulity. She asks for nothing. Malin's voice hardened. I brought her here. I made the decision to pursue this. If you wish to question someone's judgment, question mine. Silence fell over the table. Siren watched the advisors exchange glances. Doubt still lingered in their eyes, but something else was emerging too. Loyalty. These wolves trusted their king, even when his choices confused them. If we do this, General Bracken said slowly, if we escort her back to Thornvale, we risk open war. Corvath will see it as an invasion. Corvath will see what his mother tells him to see, Sireni said. Every head turned toward her. She stepped forward, her nerves screaming but her voice steady. The king I served was not cruel by nature. He was shaped, molded. Valdris has been whispering in his ear since birth, isolating him from anyone who might challenge her control. When I tried to warn him, she was already there. She had already written the script. I never stood a chance. You believe he can be turned against her? Lady Fenara asked, her eyes narrowing. I believe he doesn't know who she really is. Sirena held the spy master's gaze. He thinks he's protecting his kingdom from dark magic, from threats and traitors. He doesn't realize that the greatest threat sits beside him at every meal, sleeps down the hall from his chambers, and has been poisoning his bloodline for 30 years. Another heavy silence. And if you're wrong? General Bracken asked. If Corvath refuses to listen? If he kills you on sight? Then I die, knowing I tried. Sirene's voice didn't waver. But at least I won't die alone in the snow, screaming truths that no one will ever hear. The general studied her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. Grudging respect, perhaps. She has spine, he muttered. I'll give her that. She has more than spine. Malin rose from his chair. She has the testimony of the dead. Every victim Valdris has buried. Every inconvenient heir. Every silenced witness. They speak through her. And their voices will be heard. He looked around the table, meeting each advisor's eyes in turn. I'm not asking you to believe in shadow singers. I'm asking you to believe in me. In 15 years, have I ever led this kingdom astray? Have I ever risked your lives for nothing? No one spoke. Then trust me now. Malin's voice softened. We leave in 7 days. Anyone who wishes to remain behind may do so without shame, but I am going to Thornvale, and I am bringing her with me. Lady Fenara was the first to nod, then General Bracken. One by one, the others followed. The plan was set. Siren felt the weight of it settle over her shoulders like armor. She was going back to the kingdom that had cast her out, back to the man who had thrown her away. And somewhere in that kingdom, Queen Valdris was waiting. As the council dispersed, Lady Fenara paused beside Siren. I don't trust you, the spy master murmured. Not yet. But I trust him. Her blue eyes flickered toward Malon. Don't make him regret this. She was gone before Siren could respond. Malin approached, his expression unreadable. That went better than expected, he said. You call that better? His lips twitched. No one drew a weapon. In Keldros, that counts as a warm welcome. Despite everything, Siren felt herself smile. It was the first time she had smiled in 3 moons. The great hall of Keldros was carved from the same black stone as the rest of the palace, but here the walls were inlaid with veins of silver that caught the firelight and made the entire chamber shimmer. Siren stood at the entrance, her stomach twisted with nerves. Tonight was the Frost Court, a monthly gathering where Malin's nobles came to pay respects, present petitions, and, most importantly, gossip. Every powerful family in the kingdom would be present, and Malin had insisted she attend at his side. "They need to see you," he had said that morning. "Not as a refugee or a curiosity, but as someone under my protection. If they're going to follow us into Thornvale, they need to understand why." It made sense. Cyrene knew it made sense. But standing here now, wearing borrowed finery that hung too loose on her still-recovering frame, she felt like a fraud. "Breathe," Mirith murmured beside her. The healer had insisted on accompanying her, citing medical necessity. Cyrene suspected she simply wanted to ensure her patient didn't collapse from nerves. "I'm breathing. You're forgetting to exhale." "Fair point." The herald's voice boomed through the chamber. "Lady Cyrene of House Calindra, guest of His Majesty King Malin." House Calindra. Her mother's house, technically. A minor noble line from Thornvale's eastern borders. Malin had suggested using it rather than her father's name, which carried the stain of her banishment. The doors swung open. Every face in the great hall turned toward her. Cyrene forced herself to walk forward. The whispers started immediately, rippling through the crowd like wind through autumn leaves. She caught fragments as she passed. "That's her? The Shadow Singer? She looks half-starved. What was His Majesty thinking? Did you hear? She's the one Corvath banished. Why would he bring her here?" Cyrene kept her chin high and her eyes fixed on the throne at the far end of the hall, where Malin waited. He looked every inch the king tonight. Black and crimson, the colors of Keldros, with a silver circlet resting against his dark hair. His eyes tracked her approach, and when she reached the base of the throne, he rose. The hall went silent. "Lady Cyrene," his voice carried effortlessly. "Welcome to Keldros." He descended the steps and offered his hand. The gesture sent a ripple of shock through the crowd. A king did not offer his hand to minor nobility. A king expected them to kneel. But Malin stood there waiting, his gaze steady on hers. Cyrene took his hand. His grip was warm and strong, and he led her up the steps to stand beside the throne, not behind it, beside it, as an equal. "This woman," Malin addressed the crowd, "was cast out of Thornvale for speaking truth to power. She was left to die in the wastelands for the crime of possessing a gift that frightened lesser men." His voice hardened. "In Keldros, we do not punish courage, we honor it." Murmurs swept through the hall, some approving, others uncertain. "Lady Cyrene has my protection," Malin continued. "Any insult to her is an insult to me. Any threat against her will be answered as a threat against this throne." He paused, letting the words settle. "Am I understood?" A chorus of reluctant assent rose from the crowd. Malin nodded once, then turned to Cyrene with something almost gentle in his expression. "Sit," he said, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "And try to look less like you're facing an execution." "Easy for you to say," she muttered. "They're not staring at you like you're a 3-headed wolf." "They stared at me exactly like that when I took the throne at 19. His lips curved. "You get used to it." The evening proceeded. Nobles approached the throne to pay respects, present petitions, and steal curious glances at the strange woman seated beside their king. Cyrene endured it all, answering questions when asked, and deflecting probing inquiries when necessary. But midway through the gathering, trouble arrived. A tall man with silver blonde hair and cruel blue eyes pushed his way to the front of the crowd. His clothes marked him as high nobility, and the sneer on his face marked him as someone who knew it. "Your Majesty." He bowed, though the gesture dripped with mockery. "I must express my concerns about your newest pet." Malin's expression didn't change. "Lord Caliph, always a pleasure." "This woman is a banished criminal from an enemy kingdom." Lord Caliph's voice rose, playing to the crowd. "A shadow singer. A practitioner of dark magic. And you've installed her beside your throne like a favored consort." The whispers intensified. "Are we to understand," Caliph continued, "that the King of Keldros has been seduced by Thornvale's cast-offs? That our foreign policy is now being dictated by whatever pretty face stumbles across our borders?" Seren's blood ran cold. She opened her mouth to respond, but Malin moved first. He rose from his throne, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Lord Caliph." His voice was soft, deadly. "You've made 3 errors in the span of 30 seconds. Allow me to correct them." He descended the steps, moving with the predatory grace of a wolf who had decided his prey. "First, Lady Siren is not a pet or a consort. She is a guest under my protection, and you will address her with the respect that position demands." Lord Caliph's sneer faltered. "Second, the foreign policy of this kingdom is dictated by me, not by you, not by this court, not by anyone who lacks the crown currently resting on my head." Malin stopped directly in front of Caliph, close enough that the taller man had to tilt his head down to meet his eyes. "And third," Malin said, his tone dropping to a lethal whisper, "if you ever imply that I am susceptible to seduction again, I will rip your tongue out through your throat. Am I understood?" Lord Caliph had gone pale. Yes, Your Majesty." "Good." Malin smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "Now, apologize to Lady Serena." Caliph's jaw tightened with humiliation, but he turned to her and bowed stiffly. "My apologies, Lady Seren. I spoke out of turn." "Accepted," she said coolly. Lord Caliph retreated into the crowd, and Malin returned to his throne as if nothing had happened. The rest of the evening passed without incident, but Serena's pulse refused to settle, because she had seen something in Malin's eyes when he threatened Lord Caliph, something fierce and protective and almost desperate. And she didn't know what to do with that. That night, Siren couldn't sleep. The Frost Court had ended hours ago, but her mind refused to quiet. Lord Caliph's accusations echoed in her skull, twisting together with older, crueler words. Shadow singer, dark magic, pretty face. She rose from her bed and pulled a robe around her shoulders. The palace halls were quiet at this hour, lit only by the occasional torch. She walked without destination, letting her feet carry her where they would. Eventually, she found herself in the gardens. The night air was cold, but not cruel. Nothing like the wastelands. The gardens of Keldros were terraced into the mountainside, filled with hardy northern flowers that bloomed despite the chill. Silver moonlight painted everything in shades of gray and white. Siren settled onto a stone bench and let herself breathe. "Can't sleep either?" She startled, her wolf bristling instinctively. But it was only Malin, emerging from the shadows of a nearby archway. He had changed from his formal clothes into something simpler, and his hair was loose, falling around his shoulders in dark waves. "I'm sorry," Siren said, rising. "I didn't realize anyone else was—" "Stay." He gestured for her to sit. "Please." She hesitated, then sank back onto the bench. Malin crossed the garden and sat beside her, leaving a careful distance between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. "Lord Caliph is a fool," Malin said finally. "His words mean nothing." "His words reflected what half your court is thinking." Siren stared at the silver flowers swaying in the breeze. "They don't trust me. They think I've enchanted you somehow." "Have you?" The question was light, almost teasing, but Siren's breath caught. "No," she replied, her voice barely audible. "I don't have that kind of power. I only hear the dead. I can't influence the living." "I know." Malin's voice softened. I was joking. Poorly, apparently. I'm not very good at humor lately. Understandable. 3 moons of near starvation tends to dampen one's comedic sensibilities. Despite herself, Siren felt her lips twitch. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The wind whispered through the garden, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine. "Can I ask you something?" Siren said eventually. "Anything. Your sister." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You said she tried to warn Corvath, that she heard something. Do you know what it was?" Malin was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with old grief. "No. She sent me a letter before she was banished. Said she had discovered something terrible. Something that would change everything. But the letter was intercepted before it reached me." He exhaled slowly. "By the time I learned what had happened, she was already gone." "I'm sorry." "So am I." He turned to look at her, and in the moonlight his features were carved with shadows and sorrow. "Every day, every moment. I wonder what she would have told me, what I might have done differently." Siren's heart ached for him. She knew that grief. She lived with it too. "It's not your fault," she said gently. "You couldn't have known." "Maybe." His jaw tightened. "But I should have believed her. When she wrote that something was wrong, I should have ridden to Thornvale immediately. Instead, I waited. Assumed she was being dramatic. And by the time I realized the truth..." His voice broke. Without thinking, Siren reached out and took his hand. Malin went very still. She almost pulled away, afraid she had overstepped. But then his fingers curled around hers, warm and strong, and he held on as if she were the only thing keeping him anchored. "I believe you," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "When I stand before Corvath, when I tell him the truth about his mother, I'll make sure Sereth's death means something, I promise." Malin's grip tightened. "You shouldn't make promises you might not survive to keep." "Then I'll just have to survive." He turned to look at her, his eyes blazing with something intense and unnameable. "Yes," he breathed. "You will." The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither had words for. Siren was suddenly very aware of how close they were sitting, of the warmth of his hand in hers, of the way his gaze dropped briefly to her lips before snapping back to her eyes. Her breath caught in her throat. "Malin," she breathed. He leaned closer, just slightly, just enough that she could smell cedar and wood smoke and the dark wildness of his wolf. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. She should. She knew she should. This was dangerous. Reckless. They were about to walk into a war and she couldn't afford distractions. But the word wouldn't come. Malin's free hand rose to cup her face. His palm was warm against her cheek, his thumb brushing gently over her cheekbone. "I don't understand this," he said, his voice rough. "I've known you for days. Days. And yet..." "I know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I feel it too." He exhaled shakily. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing together, hearts pounding in the silver dark. Then Malin pulled back. The loss of contact was physical, immediate, aching. "We shouldn't," he said. His voice was strained, as if the words cost him everything. "Not now. Not with everything that's about to happen." Siren nodded, even as her wolf whined in protest. "You're right." "I know I'm right." He laughed bitterly. "That doesn't make it easier." He rose from the bench and stood there, silhouetted against the moonlit garden. When he looked at her again, his expression was carefully controlled. "Get some rest," he said. "We leave in 6 days." He turned and walked away. Siren watched him go, her hand still warm where he had held it. Something had shifted between them tonight. Something neither of them could take back. And she didn't know whether that made the coming battle easier or infinitely more terrifying. But as she finally returned to her chambers, one thought kept circling through her mind. He almost kissed me, and God's help her, she wished he had. The border of Thornvale was marked by ancient standing stones, carved with runes that had faded to near illegibility over centuries. Cyrene stood before them, her heart hammering against her ribs. The company that had ridden from Keldros numbered 50 wolves, Malin's most trusted warriors, handpicked for loyalty and discretion. They had traveled for 6 days through mountain passes and frozen valleys, and now they were here, at the edge of everything. You don't have to do this. Malin stood beside her, his expression dark with concern. We can find another way. Send messengers. Demand an audience. Valdris would intercept any messenger before they reached Corvath. Seren shook her head. The only way is through. Then let me go first. Let me. The chain doesn't bind you. She turned to face him, memorizing the lines of his face in the pale morning light. It has to be me. A muscle feathered in Malin's cheek. Over the past 6 days, something had grown between them. Something neither had named nor acknowledged openly. But it was there in every glance, every accidental touch, and every moment when their eyes met across the campfire and held for too long. Now it was there in the anguish written across his features. Seren? His voice was rough with emotion. If you die, then you finish it. She managed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You promised. He looked like he wanted to argue, like he wanted to throw her over his shoulder and carry her back to Keldros where she would be safe. Instead, he reached out and cupped her face in his hands. Come back to me, he said fiercely. Whatever happens in there, whatever Corvath does or says, you come back to me. Do you understand? Cyrene's throat tightened. Malin. Promise me. She covered his hands with her own. I promise. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her in an embrace that felt like desperation and prayer combined. Cyrene buried her face against his chest, breathing in the familiar warmth of him, letting herself have this one moment of weakness. Then she pulled away. Let's go, she said, and she stepped across the border. The pain hit immediately. It started in her chest, a cold pressure that wrapped around her heart and squeezed. Seren gasped, stumbling, and Malin caught her arm. Cyrene! I'm fine. She forced herself to straighten. It's starting. The chain. The cold spread outward from her heart, creeping through her veins like frost through cracked glass. Every step she took deeper into Thornvale made it worse, made the pressure heavier, made her heartbeat more irregular. But she kept walking. The capital city of Thornvale rose from the valley floor like a crown of silver spires. Cyrene had grown up in the shadow of those towers, had served in the palace at their center, had loved the king who ruled from within. Now she was returning as an invader, a dead woman walking. The gates of the city were barred against them, but Malin's presence made that irrelevant. An alpha king could not be denied entry, not without sparking immediate war. The guards exchanged panicked glances and scrambled to send word to the palace while the heavy wooden doors swung reluctantly open. They rode through streets that Seren remembered from another life. The whispers started before they had gone 3 blocks. Is that the king of Keldros? Who is the woman beside him? Wait, that's Lady Seren, the one who was banished. But that's impossible. The chain would kill her. By the time they reached the palace, Seren could barely stay upright in her saddle. The cold had spread to her limbs, making her fingers numb and her legs weak. Her heartbeat stuttered and skipped, fighting against the magical chains that were slowly crushing it. Malin helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist. How much time? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Hours. She forced the word through chattering teeth. Maybe less. His expression hardened with fury. Not at her. At the world that was trying to take her from him. The palace doors opened and a contingent of guards poured out, surrounding them with drawn weapons. King Mylin of Keldros. The captain's voice was stiff with barely controlled panic. You enter Thornvale uninvited. This is an act of, I'm here to speak with King Corvath. Malin's voice cut through the bluster like a blade. Bring him to me, now. The king does not answer summons from... The king will answer me. Malin stepped forward, and his alpha presence rolled outward like a wave, crushing the captain's resistance. Unless he would prefer I tear through this palace room by room until I find him myself. The captain paled and retreated. Minutes passed. Seren leaned against Malon, drawing what warmth she could from his body. The cold inside her was spreading faster now. She could feel her heart laboring, each beat more difficult than the last. Then the doors opened again, and there he was. Alpha King Corvath of Thornvale strode into the courtyard with all the arrogance Seren remembered. He was tall and golden, his hair catching the sunlight like a crown of flames. His blue eyes swept over the scene, registering Malon, the Keldros warriors, and finally, her. He stopped dead. Seren? She pushed herself away from Malin and stood on trembling legs. Your Majesty. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. We need to talk. You're supposed to be dead. Corvath's expression flickered with something she couldn't read. Shock? Guilt? Fear? The chain is killing me as we speak. She pressed a hand to her chest, where the cold had become a constant crushing weight. But I had to come. I had to tell you the truth. About your mother. About everything. Corvath's expression shuddered closed. My mother warned me you would try this. His voice hardened. She said you would return with lies and manipulation, that your dark magic would compel you to destroy our kingdom from within. She's the one who's been destroying it. Seren stepped forward, desperate. Corvath, please. You have to listen to me. She's been poisoning your bloodline for decades. She killed your father. She killed Lord Varen and Lady Osha. She's been murdering anyone who gets too close to the truth. Silence. The command cracked through the air and Seren flinched. Corvath's blue eyes blazed with anger. You expect me to believe that my mother, the woman who raised me, who protected me, who has devoted her entire life to this kingdom, is a murderer? Based on what? The whispers of ghosts that only you can hear? It's the truth. It's dark magic. Corvath's lip curled. Exactly as she warned me. You've enchanted the King of Keldros. Used him to gain access to me. And now you're trying to tear apart my family with your poisonous lies. I haven't enchanted anyone. Sereni's voice broke. Corvath, you know me. You've known me for years. Have I ever lied to you? Have I ever given you any reason to doubt my loyalty? A shadow of doubt crossed his features. Just for a moment. Then a new voice cut through the tension. That's quite enough. Queen Valdris emerged from the palace, her silver hair gleaming in the sunlight. She was beautiful in the way that winter was beautiful. Cold and deadly and absolutely merciless. Her gray eyes fixed on Seren with naked hatred. You should have died in the mountains, Valdris said, her tone smooth as silk over steel. I made certain of it. I arranged for your supplies to be sabotaged, for the wolves who escorted you to abandon you in the worst possible location. Seren's blood ran cold. She had suspected, but hearing it confirmed. Mother. Corvath frowned. What are you saying? I'm saying she's dangerous. Valdris glided forward, her hand coming to rest on her son's arm. I'm saying she's exactly the kind of threat I've been protecting you from your entire life. Shadow singers don't just hear the dead, Corvath. They can twist those whispers into weapons. Make you believe anything they want you to believe. That's not true, Seren gasped. Isn't it? Valdris smiled coldly. Then why does the King of Keldros stand at your side like a trained hound? Why did he risk war to bring you here? Unless, of course, you've wrapped him around your finger with your dark magic. Enough. Malin's voice was ice. I am no one's puppet. And I am here because your queen is a murderer who has been destroying both our kingdoms for decades. My sister. Malin stepped forward, his gaze blazing with fierce conviction. Sareth. She was a shadow singer too. She discovered something about you, didn't she? Something damning. That's why you had her banished. That's why you left her to die. A crack appeared in Valdris's composure, just for an instant. Then she turned to her son. Kill them, she said simply. Both of them. The banished traitor and the enemy king. It's the only way to protect our kingdom. Corvath hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, Cyrene's heart gave a violent lurch. She gasped, her hand flying to her chest. The cold had become a vice, crushing, relentless. Her vision blurred, her legs buckled. Malin caught her before she hit the ground. Cyrene. His voice seemed to come from very far away. Cyrene, stay with me. The chain. She could barely form the words. It's finishing. No. Malin pulled her against him, his arms tight around her trembling body. No. You promised. You promised you'd come back to me. She tried to respond, but the cold had reached her throat, her lips, her tongue. The world went dark. Cyrene drifted in shadows. The voices of the dead surrounded her, louder than they had ever been. Not whispers now, but screams. Hundreds of them. Thousands. All the souls who had died with truth on their lips. All the victims who had never received justice. And among them, one voice rang clearer than the rest. Sister of the Alpha King, Sareth, I hear you. The darkness shifted, and suddenly Cyrene was standing in a field of black flowers beneath a starless sky. Before her stood a woman with dark hair and eyes like autumn fire, Malin's eyes. You're Sareth, Cyrene breathed. I was. The ghost smiled sadly. Now I am nothing but a voice among many, but you, Shadow Singer, you can still speak for us. I'm dying. Yes. Sareth nodded. The chain has nearly finished its work. But you are between worlds now. Between life and death. And in this space, you have power you've never touched. What power? The power to show them. Sareth gestured, and the field of black flowers transformed. Suddenly, Cyrene was standing in the throne room of Thornvale, watching a younger Valdris pour poison into a golden goblet. Watching her smile as she handed it to the former king. Watching him drink. Watching him die. This is what I discovered, Sareth said. This is what she killed me for knowing. But you can show them, Cyrene. You can pull the shadows into the waking world. Make them see what we have seen. How? Let us speak through you. Sareth took her hands and her touch was cold, but not cruel. Let us fill you with our memories, our truths. And when you wake, when you stand before the king who banished you, let us pour out of you like a flood. It could kill me. You're already dying. Sareth's gaze burned with fierce determination. But this way, your death will mean something. This way, the truth will finally be heard. Cyrene thought of Malin, of the promise she had made, of the look in his eyes when she had collapsed in his arms. She thought of Corvath, of the boy she had once known before his mother had twisted him into a weapon, of the king who might still be saved if she could just make him see. She thought of all the shadow voices she carried, all the dead who had trusted her with their final words. Yes, she said, I'll do it. Sareth smiled and leaned forward, pressing a kiss to Cyrene's forehead. Then wake, Shadow Singer, wake and burn. Cyrene's eyes flew open. She was lying on cold stone, her body convulsing with the chain's crushing grip. Malin knelt beside her, his face pale with desperation. Around them, guards had their weapons drawn, and Valdris was speaking, ordering, commanding. Execute them both immediately, the traitor and the enemy king. I want their heads on pikes by Corvath. Cyrene's voice came out as a rasp, but it silenced the courtyard. She pushed herself up on trembling arms. The shadows inside her were churning, building, desperate to be released. Corvath, she said again. You want proof? I'll give you proof. She reached deep inside herself, to the place where the shadow voices lived. And she let them out. Darkness exploded from her body. It poured outward like smoke, filling the courtyard, blotting out the sunlight. And within the darkness, shapes began to form. Faces. Figures. The ghosts of all those Valdris had murdered, made visible for the first time. She poisoned me. The former king stepped forward, his golden crown still on his translucent brow. Your mother. My wife. She put nightshade in my wine and watched me die. Corvath stumbled backward, his face ashen. Father? She killed us to hide her crimes. Lord Varen and Lady Osha appeared, their forms flickering. We found the records, the payments to assassins, the bribes to healers. She's been murdering your bloodline for 30 years. More ghosts emerged. A young nobleman with a slit throat. A healer who had asked too many questions. A maidservant who had witnessed something she shouldn't have. She killed me. She killed me. She killed me. The voices rose in a terrible chorus echoing off the palace walls. And then Sareth stepped forward. Hello, Corvath. Her smile was sad but fierce. You probably don't remember me. I served in your court for only a few months before your mother had me banished. But I remember you. I remember hoping you were different from her. Corvath's eyes were wide with horror. This is dark magic. Illusions. It has to be. Look at me. Sareth's voice sharpened. You knew my brother once. Before the war. Before your mother poisoned every relationship between our kingdoms. You were friends as children. Recognition sparked in Corvath's expression. Ask yourself, Sareth continued, why she worked so hard to make you hate him. Why she started a war that has claimed thousands of lives. Why she has spent your entire reign making you afraid of everyone, everything, except her. Corvath turned slowly to face his mother. Valdris's mask had cracked. Her gray eyes blazed with fury as she stared at the ghosts surrounding her, at the evidence of 3 decades of murder made manifest in shadow and smoke. This is a trick, she hissed. Dark magic. The Shadow Singer has enchanted you all. The shadows don't lie. Siren's voice was stronger now, fueled by the power pouring through her. They carry the dying words of the innocent. They speak only truth. I am your mother. Valdris whirled on Corvath, her composure shattering. I am the one who has protected you, guided you, and made you the king you are. You made me a puppet. Corvath's voice was hollow with dawning horror. You made me send innocent people to die. You made me start a war that has claimed thousands of lives. You made me believe that anyone who loved me was a threat. He stopped. His hands were shaking. The woman I loved. His voice broke. The healer. Nasara. She died of winter fever 5 years ago. Except it wasn't winter fever, was it? Valdris's silence was answer enough. I was going to propose to her. Corvath's eyes filled with tears. I was going to make her my queen. But she got sick so suddenly. And you were there, comforting me, telling me it was fate, telling me I needed to be strong. A sob tore from his throat. You killed her. You killed the woman I loved because she would have taken me away from you. The ghosts pressed closer, their whispers rising. And Siren felt the last of her strength begin to fade. She had given everything to summon them, every scrap of power she possessed. The chain was crushing her heart to stillness, and she had accelerated the process by channeling the dead. But it was worth it. Corvath had seen the truth. Her legs buckled, and she collapsed. Siren. Malin caught her before she hit the stone. The shadows were fading now, the ghosts retreating back into the darkness from which they had come. Sareth lingered longest, her gaze meeting her brother's one final time. I love you, she whispered. I never blamed you. Then she was gone. Malin clutched Siren's limp body, his wolf howling with rage and grief. Her heartbeat was barely perceptible, a weak flutter against his palm. The chain was finishing its work. Corvath. He looked up at the Thornvale king with murder in his eyes. Revoke the banishment, now, before she dies. Corvath stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and devastation. Around him, the courtyard had descended into chaos. Guards shouted conflicting orders. Nobles who had witnessed the shadow manifestation were fleeing in terror. And Valdris was running. Seize her! Corvath's voice cracked with authority for the first time in his life. The queen is under arrest for treason and murder. No one lets her leave this courtyard. Guards scrambled to obey. Valdris made it 3 steps before she was surrounded, her escape cut off by the wolves she had commanded for 30 years. You ungrateful wretch! She whirled on her son, all pretense of elegance abandoned. Everything I did was for you, for this kingdom, for our bloodline. Our bloodline? Corvath laughed bitterly. You've been murdering our bloodline, culling anyone who might challenge your control. Because they were weak. Valdris's gray eyes blazed. Your father was weak. Your cousins were weak. They would have destroyed everything I built. I made you strong, Corvath. I made you king. You made me a monster. Corvath's voice shook. You made me banish innocent people to die. You made me start a war that has claimed thousands of lives. You made me believe that anyone who loved me was a threat. He stepped closer, towering over the woman who had controlled his entire existence. I'm done, he said, his tone flat and final. I'm done being your weapon. He turned to face Malin and the dying woman in his arms. The banishment, Malin demanded. End it, now. Corvath's jaw tightened. For a moment, his old pride flickered across his features. A king did not take orders from a rival king. A king did not admit he had been wrong. But then his eyes fell on Siren's still face, on the woman who had tried to save him from his own blindness, the woman he had thrown away because his mother had told him to. I, Corvath, Alpha King of Thornvale, he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Revoke the banishment of Siren of House Kalindra. She is no longer an enemy of this kingdom. She is free to walk our lands without harm. The words resonated with old magic, and in Malin's arms, Siren gasped. The crushing pressure around her heart released. The cold that had been killing her began to recede. Her heartbeat steadied, grew stronger, found its rhythm again. Her eyes fluttered open. Malin? Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm here. He pressed his forehead to hers, tears streaming down his face. I'm here. You're alive. You did it. The chain? Broken. He laughed, the sound raw with relief. It's broken. You're free. She reached up with trembling fingers and touched his face. I promised, she murmured. Told you I'd come back. He kissed her. Right there in the courtyard of his enemy's palace, surrounded by chaos and guards and the wreckage of 3 decades of manipulation, Malin kissed her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Because she was. When they finally broke apart, Siren turned her head to see Corvath standing over his mother. Valdris had been forced to her knees, her wrists bound with silver chains that would suppress her wolf. You'll regret this, the former queen hissed. Everything I did for... Enough. Corvath's voice was cold. You'll stand trial for your crimes. Every murder, every manipulation, every life you destroyed. He paused. Including the life you tried to destroy today. He looked at Siren, and something complicated passed across his features. I'm sorry, he said, his voice rough with regret. I should have believed you. I should have listened. Siren studied the man she had once loved. The man who had thrown her away. The man who was finally, painfully, seeing clearly for the first time. I forgive you, she said. Not because he deserved it, but because carrying the weight of hatred was exhausting, and she had already carried enough. We need to talk, Corvath continued, looking between her and Malon. About the war. About everything my mother set in motion. About how we rebuild from here. Later. Malin's arm tightened around Sireni. For now, she needs rest. Real rest. In a place where no one is trying to kill her. Corvath nodded slowly. Of course. I'll have quarters prepared, and I'll send my best healers. Send them to Keldros. Malin's voice brooked no argument. She's coming home with me. Emotion rippled across Corvath's features. Pain, perhaps. Or acceptance. As you wish. He turned away, returning his attention to his mother, to the chaos surrounding them, to the kingdom he would have to rebuild from the ground up. And Malin lifted Sireni in his arms and carried her toward the gates. 6 months later, the gardens of Keldros were in full bloom. Sireni walked among the silver flowers, her fingers trailing over petals that caught the sunlight and scattered it into prisms. She was healthy now, strong. The hollowness in her cheeks had filled out, and her wolf had regained its fierce brightness. But more than her body had healed. The shadows were quieter these days. Not gone, never gone, but peaceful. Content. As if the justice served to Valdris had soothed the restless dead who had been crying out for so long, the former queen had been tried and executed 3 months ago. Her crimes had been laid bare before both kingdoms, documented and witnessed by hundreds. The war between Thornvale and Keldros had officially ended, replaced by a tentative peace that grew stronger with each passing week. Corvath was struggling, Siren knew. The revelation of his mother's manipulations had shattered something fundamental in him. He was rebuilding himself piece by piece, but it would take time. She had exchanged letters with him. Careful, measured correspondence that was slowly becoming something like friendship, not what they had once been. Never that. But something new. Something honest. It was enough. There you are. Siren turned to see Malin approaching through the garden. He was smiling, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his sharp features into something breathtakingly beautiful. Looking for me? She teased. Always. He reached her side and pulled her into his arms. I have news from Thornvale. Good news? The best. His gaze sparkled with excitement. Corvath has officially lifted the ban on shadow singers. They're to be welcomed throughout the kingdom, trained at a new academy being established in the capital. Protected by royal decree. Siren's breath caught. Truly. Truly. Malin pressed a kiss to her forehead. Your people will never be hunted again, in either kingdom. Tears pricked at her eyes. She had hoped for this, dreamed of it, but hearing it confirmed. Sereth would be so happy, she whispered. Yes. Malin's voice softened with bittersweet emotion. She would. They stood together in comfortable silence, wrapped in each other's arms. The sunlight was warm on their faces, and somewhere in the palace, servants were preparing for tonight's celebration. The formal declaration of peace between the two kingdoms. The beginning of a new era. I have something else to tell you, Malin said eventually. Oh? He pulled back slightly, his expression suddenly nervous. It was such an unusual look on him that Siren felt her heart skip. I've been thinking, he began, then stopped. Cleared his throat, started again. When I found you in that cave, half dead and still fighting, I knew something had changed. Something fundamental. And every day since then, every moment I've spent with you, has only confirmed what my wolf recognized from the very beginning. Sireni's pulse quickened. Malin, let me finish. He took her hands in his grip warm and steady. You are the bravest person I've ever known, the strongest, the most infuriatingly stubborn. She laughed despite the tears building in her eyes. You challenged me when I was wrong, he continued. You stood beside me when I was afraid. You walked into certain death to expose the truth, and you survived through sheer force of will. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. I don't want to spend another day without you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't want to rule this kingdom alone when I could rule it with you beside me. He opened the box, revealing a ring of silver and amber, the colors of Keldros woven together in an intricate pattern. Siren of House Kalindra, Shadow Singer, the woman who saved 2 kingdoms with the power of truth. He met her eyes, his own burning with love and hope and vulnerability. Will you be my queen? Sireni stared at the ring, at the man holding it, at the future he was offering her. A future she had never dared imagine, a future where she was not hunted or hidden or afraid, a future where she was loved, fully and completely, by a man who had seen her darkest truths and chosen her anyway. Yes, she breathed. Malin's face broke into the most radiant smile she had ever seen. He slid the ring onto her finger, and then he kissed her with such tenderness, such devotion, that she felt her soul catch fire. When they finally broke apart, breathless and grinning like fools, Siren rested her forehead against his. I love you, she said. I should have told you months ago. You're telling me now. His arms tightened around her. That's all that matters. They walked back toward the palace hand in hand, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Tonight they would celebrate peace. Tomorrow they would begin building a future. And somewhere in the shadows, the voices of the dead whispered their approval. 1 year later, Queen Siren stood on the balcony of Keldros' palace, watching the sun rise over her kingdom. Her hand rested on the swell of her belly, where the heir to both Thornvale and Keldros grew strong and healthy. The child would be raised knowing both lands, both peoples, both histories. A symbol of the peace their parents had forged from the ashes of war. You're awake early. She turned to see Malin approaching, his hair sleep-tousled and his eyes soft with love. Couldn't sleep. She smiled. Your daughter is very active this morning. Daughter? His eyebrows rose. I thought we weren't certain yet. A mother knows. She took his hand and placed it on her belly. Besides, Sareth told me. Malin went still. Sareth? She visits sometimes, in dreams. Sirene's smile turned gentle. She's happy for us, for everything we've built. She wanted me to tell you that she's proud of you. Malin's eyes glistened, but he didn't look away. Thank you, he said, his voice rough with emotion, for telling me. They stood together in the golden morning light, king and queen, bound by love and loss and the unshakable determination to build something better from the ruins of the past. Below them, the kingdom was waking. Markets were opening, children were playing, wolves were shifting and running through the forests, free and wild and unafraid. And in the academy at the heart of the city, young shadow singers were learning to use their gifts, not as curses to be feared, but as blessings to be celebrated. Voices for the voiceless, truth speakers in a world that desperately needed them. We did it, Siren murmured. We actually did it. We did. Malin pulled her close, his lips brushing her temple. And we're just getting started. She leaned into him, her heart full to bursting. The mating auction where no one wanted you. The wastelands where you went to die. The chains that were meant to destroy her. None of it had been the end. It had only been the beginning. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it and want to hear more tales of love, magic, and redemption, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Let me know in the comments what you thought, and which character was your favorite. Your support means more than you know, and I read every single comment. Until next time.